going to work. Hey, we are live, folks. We are live. And this month, there's only 3 of us. We're missing someone because he is, I don't know, well, we were just discussing whether he will be under an umbrella, being blown away, but he is in less than sunny Dumfries. So we say hello to Dan in less than sunny Dumfries and hope he is having an amazing time. But meanwhile, it is left for us 3 to roll the show out. Welcome, guys. Lovely to have you as ever.
Good to be here.
So some of us have just returned from exotic climates that are not rain and the like. Clearly, that's not England or Ireland for that matter. Shall we just say? But yeah, so I don't know. Tonight, we were kind of like scheduled to talk about, well, and we still will talk about father figures and future men. I mean, clearly I was having a very long conversation with Charlie Chat, aka ChatGPT at the time when I was having this conversation. But I it's really interesting because over the last few days on LinkedIn, there's been a couple of things that have come up where conversations have been about, there was somebody talking about her last conversation with her father and the role model. And that kind of really got me into this place over the role model that my dad was to me. And I was having a conversation with somebody else to do with our active bystander training. And they were sort of like, oh, no, can't do this. No, that's not me. And I'm just like, well, why isn't it you? Okay, so is it about you not feeling comfortable to it, or is it that you just think you've got this covered? I don't know. So anyway, that's my opening ramble, because I guess for me, it's like there's just been so many things in the last 48 hours where it's just like really made me think about, is it role modeling more generally, whether it's men or women, how they role model? Is it about masculinity? And I don't know. So I'm going to throw it to you guys. Mark, Matt, there you go. Over to you.
Well, I guess starting from my side, I think role modeling is hugely important. And I think it's a different form of role modeling in today's society that, perhaps it would have been 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, because I mean, I've come from a country, Hong Kong, where it is the norm that both men and women have successful careers and children and everything that goes with it, because of the proliferation of cheap childcare that you get there. And so for my last 15, 16 years, it's been very normative to be in an environment where children see men and women being big, successful career people. And then I've transitioned back to the UK where, in all honesty, it's still not at that point. We're still in I feel a society which still recognizes more that the man is the breadwinner or what have you. And clearly the narrative has changed a huge amount already. But I think say in comparison with a country like Hong Kong, which for the reasons I mentioned is different, it's still got a long way to go. Now, personally, me coming into this country again, I'm in a very different situation because I did have the big corporate career, but I completely burnt out and I am no longer the big breadwinner. So the 2 children in my house see mum going off to London every day, doing the commute, doing the big high-powered career, and see dad doing the school runs, the sporting runs, the social engagement runs. Dad taxi is my other job, basically. Doesn't pay very well in certain ways, fantastically in others. but it you know, I still don't think that is the norm. You know, it's still very much the other way round typically. So, you know, I think it's nice that my kids have seen a culture where both parents have big successful careers. I think it's nice that my kids are now in this culture where, you know, maybe it's a little bit different, but again, it's mum being the big role model of successful career, and dad is establishing a successful career, but in a different way with different parameters. So, you know, I feel pleased that my kids are seeing that kind of role model. But I'm also very conscious that I was also a very different sort of role model, not so much for my daughter, who was too young at the time, but for my son, very definitely, when I burnt out. Because that was then me being unwell, me being vulnerable. And that was a very different sort of role model again that we perhaps have with the stereotype. Now, I wish I hadn't gone there. I wish that hadn't happened. And there's been a good amount of my role modeling through that phase, which has not been positive, because they saw a dad that was short-tempered, snappy, irritable, you know, that it's okay to shout, which it's not. However, on the flip side, coming out of that, I was also able to have conversations with my son about, you know, it's okay to not be okay. The vulnerability there, that dad isn't well, he's taking some time out. And it did sort of normalize that kind of conversation, which I think is only beneficial as well, that we normalize therapy, we normalize discussion, we normalize vulnerability. So again, I've been sort of rambling a lot there, but I think it's I think the kind of role modeling we're talking about is changing, is shifting. It's not the same as, it's not as far along as other cultures, but I think it is changing. And I hope with some of the active bystander training that you're leading, Laura, that we do see engagement there, because I think that is a key part of male role modeling still, is to look at how we show up, how we engage, how we be part of the solution and not just be satisfied with not being part of the problem. Like, that's not really enough. Being part of the solution is where we hopefully can go.
No, I totally hear you, Matt. And before I kind of get Mark to make comment, because there's just a couple of comments I just want to bring in from the audience around the points that you've made, from Chris, saying Asian culture is full of contradictions indeed. On one hand, we have fully equal role families, and on one hand, we have the extreme opposite with women with no role outside the house and kitchen. And I think that is so true. And the second point you made, I think, is absolutely to your point. And in fact, actually, even today, I've been on a conference for most of today, and the closing piece was, because many of you will know that I am the independent advisory group chair to Kent Police for my area, and so it was all around, you know, the role that we play, and the closing line was around, this is about humanity, and I think Chris has like touched on it right here. I think the need is to model humanity in the families. I mean, she goes on to say, in my household, we didn't see things as mum things or dad things, but parent things and parenting partner things. We all have circling chores and responsibilities that made a huge difference in how we grew up and what we believe in. And I couldn't agree more on that. I really can't. But I think it is humanity. So Mark, you know, like, welcome to the conversation. You know, we have gone straight in the deep end.
So you're asking me to sum up humanity. Okay, where do I begin? I think
one of those, you know, those conversations where there's the monks and the cat and all the rest of it, and you know, I'll be very happy.
Well, I'm sure I could find a story to tell, but I know you will, definitely. I think an interesting starting point is simply the idea of role playing itself, right? And being able to see what's important, be able to see. And okay, I'll take it out of this particular context into two contexts. One is I know there's a girl on Strictly at the moment who has a young lady who has Down syndrome. And my friend who has a daughter with Down syndrome posted a video online the other day of her daughter dancing in her sitting room with the girl with Down syndrome's Strictly performance in the background recorded. You know, and so there's a perfect example of being able to see yourself in that space and how important that is to be able to see yourself, to know you can do that. And that's one side of things. And I think, you know, if we talk about the role playing, and we try and avoid having to talk about the Andrew Tates and Thus Is This World, but in a way, he's role playing for young men who want to see themselves in that space. And that's why it works so well. But then another one from a role-playing example is, you probably recall, maybe it was a year ago, I can't remember the exact timeline, when the Disney were redoing The Little Mermaid and they changed her skin color. And there was a huge amount of objections by white people in particular. Why do you have to mess with this? Like, she's white. It's a cartoon character. She wasn't anything. Like, she's a creation. She's an invention. She's not real. But it was very interesting how the threat of that role became so significant to people, you know, which I think is an idea of where role playing is very difficult, because there is a lot of threat in that role playing. And then to your point, Matt, where you lovely talked about the strength and vulnerability, there is threat in being a man and not playing the male role. There's a threat in that for us. Like, who am I if I don't do that? But what is that role, and what role are we adopting to play? Like, I cite a simple example of, we get in the car and I'd said to my wife, do you want to drive or will I drive? You know, so we decide who's driving, rather than I'm the man, I drive the car, which I know like a lot of people that would be the attitude. I'm the man, I drive. This is my job. Like, you sit in the passenger seat, you know, as opposed to, and I would have thought that a little bit. My wife challenged me on that, and she's absolutely right. Why do I have a right to drive over she having a right to drive? Let's see who wants to drive, you know, and then we can take that on board. But in that is slightly letting go of the role, and Chris had a lovely comment there about, you know, taking the different roles and trying to blend them in that way. I think that's the really important point in it. How do we take those different roles? Because we are capable. Okay, maybe, and I don't know about you, Matt, maybe we're not fully capable of taking all the roles in the family home. There's parts where I am not as good as my wife at doing, absolutely, and I know that. And I will try and do some things, and I might fail miserably, and my kids might go, do you know what, Dad, can we just have Mom for this, because you're just terrible, this doesn't work, right? And that's fair. I completely hold that up. I accept that, right? But then for me not to try, or for me to just say that's not my role and dismiss that, then that's completely wrong, and that's wrong of me. And what am I modeling when I do that? What am I saying that that's not my role? And then I'm giving the impression to my daughters, if they find themselves in a situation, well, that's the mother role, that's my role, I have to assume that role in this position. So I think we need to challenge ourselves all the time for what that is, because how do we define in where humanity is? Like, how do we keep that defined so that we know how to play? We have to reimagine it as we're living it at the moment, I think, and that's how we play these roles in a better way.
And I'm going to pick up on the point that you make around, you know, your daughter was saying, but Mum's much better at that than you are. So maybe that's the point. Maybe it's not about that's a dad role or it's a mum role. It's actually about what you are better at doing in the moment. And, you know, I know there are certain things that many would go, but that's a dad role in official terms. But I'm much better at doing it. I mean, clearly I am not a mum. Well, not necessarily clearly, but I'm not. And so I kind of go to this place of maybe the key is that it's more about who we are, irrespective of the role we're trying to play or the title that people try to give us in order to make people feel, well, I know where you fit in, rather than actually just going, well, you're Mark, you're Matt, you know, and your respective partners, whatever else, and I know you for your strengths, and your strengths are this, and they might be absolutely brilliant at things that we wouldn't conventionally say are male roles. And maybe that's the key. I don't know. You know, because I think there's a huge thing around this I know it's almost like the silence, the thing that's unsaid about the roles that we carry without actually saying something. And that, you know, there's a perception about a dad role, a male role. Is it what, you know, oh, is there a women's role? Is there, and maybe it's that silent perception that we all carry.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not.
I like to refer back to Germaine Greer at this point, who I think it was her that said that there's only two things in this world that men are better at women at, and those are designing dresses and cooking, and that's it. So yeah, it's that. I think back to this point about humanity. I think the most important thing really for role modeling is communication, and discussion on these points. It's interesting you said about, Mark, your wife calling you out on that's not something that I do or typically do. But equally, I've recently been calling out my wife the opposite way, in terms of she likes things just so. She likes things to be done a certain way. And so I've actually been actively calling her out and going, but unless you embrace the fact that it might not be done your way and accept that it's getting done, but maybe in a different way, then the kids will see that that is mum's role, because you always do that. Be that the packing for the holiday, which it might have strayed into more argumentative stuff than just discussion and communication.
You're just trying to be polite there, Matt.
Trying to be a little bit polite. But things around cooking, you know, and things like this, that, you know, that maybe there's a way that it's nice to be done, and maybe I'm a little bit more messy when I cook, but as long as I clean up afterwards, that's okay. So it does need to be that two-way communication.
I love that. I mean, you know, see, I mean, I'm smiling because, like, frankly, for me, there is no one I can share this with. It's like, you know, I you know, it is what it is. So, you know, I in some ways I probably get it easy because I can tell myself what I want. But I, you know, all joking aside, I think there is that, and you know, and I think a lot of people, and I think women are very good at it. It's like that they're going to this place where I've got all this stuff to do. I've organised all in my head, but they fail to recognise that there are people along the line, but they're so consumed in, you know, getting the job done and making sure everybody's okay, because that's, you know, that is a maternal instinct. But actually, I think they lose people along the way as well in the desire to. It's not necessarily to exclude or to necessarily belittle the effort of others. It's just, you know, that whole thing of I've got to look after everybody. And so I think this is where actually women play a role in recognizing that it doesn't matter how it comes to the table, we all play a role to come to the other side. So this is where I think women play a role to facilitate a different conversation, which is why, you know, I'm adamant that no conversation can happen, you know, women in one room and men in another room, because nothing's ever going to change. I don't know, Mark, where's your head with this?
Like you know, you made an interesting comments about the fact that you approached people to do the bystander training, and you know they rejected you out of hand. You know, I'm not doing that. And I suppose, you know, the question then is, what's the resistance? Why the resistance? If you know it is something that has value, if you know it's something that needs to be, if from their perspective, if they acknowledge that it has value, if they acknowledge that it's a challenge that we face, then why do they abdicate from taking the responsibility for facing that challenge when offered the opportunity? You know, okay, maybe it's a time thing, you know, maybe have reasons, right? But how did they role model? And it got me thinking about, like, you know, so where are our role models? Where are they out there? Like, where do you find a role model? And, like, you know, you go on social media and it is hard to find that many positive role models in many respects, because, you know, role modeling positive behavior isn't usually that entertaining in many respects. It doesn't make me want to watch more of these videos. Like, I often cite, I would read an awful lot, and my favorite book is one of those very rare things in literature. It's a book about a good person. And it's a book about a good man. And it's very rare we write about a good man, because it's very hard to make someone good interesting. It's very hard to make someone, you know, they need to have a flaw. There needs to be something. And there's slight flaws, but it's the humanity that shines through, the absolute humanity in him that shines through, and being a good man and leading, because he has a very young son and he's an old man, and he's writing a letter to his young son because he knows he won't see him grow up. And in the letter, he's trying to put the lessons he learned, and he's trying to model a behavior, but he's been very open about what I did wrong too. And so I want to show you what I did wrong, so you know I wasn't perfect. And you'll also know that it's okay to make mistakes and learn and grow from those mistakes. But it's such a rare thing to have a good man as a model and a character. You know, where do we see it? In anything, you know, do we see that thing? And I think that's what it highlights such an example. Half the time because it's not interesting, but to the point if we can't see it, you know. So therefore, those guys who don't want to do it, they don't want to do it because they can't see an example. They can't see a model of someone who's done that and has made a difference and proved to have value. Like, why have I signed up? Because I know it has value. Because suddenly I've been given this opportunity to do this, and I know I can learn. I'm a dad of 2 daughters. This is something I have to learn. I don't get to teach any sons, but I'd like to hope I can learn to model my behavior in a better way to show examples. So I think I have an onus to do that. But how can we get everyone else to think and understand that? You know, like, to finish it off, like, you know, we live in a world where people are talking about it's the refugees make our countries not safe for women, but our countries weren't safe for women before the refugees got here. So what are we talking about?
Yeah, and no, I'm totally with you, Mark, because, you know, actually, factually, more attacks to women happen from those that we know, not strangers.
Yeah.
And they're, you know, and one of the things before you made that comment, I was kind of heading to in my head was the role of media in setting up a narrative about what we should be. And, you know, and interesting that you make the comment about a good man, and, you know, what defines a good man. And I think the media, unfortunately, has so warped what makes a good man, and a good man's going to, I don't know, tell you all these things that, you know, they probably almost 2 extremes. One, that, you know, they've achieved so much, or that their life has been so full of challenge that, you know, and what they've overcome. You know, the vast majority of people that sit in the middle part are going, well, I don't sit into either narrative, so where do I fit in? Does that make me less valuable? And I guess I go to this place of, is it that's shaping the narrative about expectation that then sets the precedent about how we should show up? You know, it's, I don't know.
It's a very interesting one. I mean, I used to. I mean, Mark makes a very good point. I used to watch when I was younger. There used to be family watching of EastEnders, and I'm talking back in the 90s when I was growing up. And I grew tired of that because I didn't see a conversation on there that wasn't an argument. You know, there was no actual sort of rational discussion ever. Because, as Mark says, that's not interesting. Rational, calm, logical discussion isn't interesting. So you do see in media, in soap operas, etc., you see a lot of modeling that is not positive. Yeah. On the flip side, I'm not in this world at all, but the social media world, I've actually, because again, our household are big Strictly fans, and that's a fantastic role model in some way, like seeing guys actively embrace dancing. It's a very different role, but hey, it's for some people it clearly isn't, but you'd argue that's as much as men as it is women. And I'm thinking, what was the name? Anne Widdecombe, clearly not a dancer, going back in the day. But yeah, like we sit and watch that family. We love it. My son's grown up dancing, doing ballroom and Latin, as well as my daughter, and they both love it. But some of the social media people coming through on there, I've been really pleased to see, have actually been genuinely decent guys. There's one on this year. Again, I don't know him at all. Apparently he's got a huge social media following. He comes across as a really nice guy. And there was one a couple of years ago saying, like, I don't know this world at all, but funnily enough, I'm almost seeing some coming through more through that than regular mainstream media. And then you've got the Andrew Tates, and then it all goes wrong. But
And I know Mark and I, before you joined us, Matt, we've talked about Andrew Tate before, and I think it's, I think therein lies. Well, one of the things I was thinking of before you mentioned Andrew Tate was, are we all endeavouring to pursue perfection, and are we all, endeavouring to pursue an idol, for want of a better word, or somebody who just looks like they've got it together, and therein lies the unraveling of us all. Not I don't know. What do you think, Mark?
I think we have to begin by admitting we're not comfortable in this space. I think that's our starting point. Because I think to pretend we are is to adopt a role as a man who knows everything immediately and suddenly cut off the potential to learn and to grow in the space. And I think that's a massive part of it. I think too, if we look at Matt, to your point there, but we are much more heavily involved in childcare and family rearing than our fathers and than any generation of men ever in the history of this part of the world had ever been. We've had to learn, and I often said, I think my father had it quite lucky. He used to come home from work to have his dinner ready for him, and he'd go to football, for the evening or whatever else he was doing, whereas we had to learn how to do all these other things, which is good for us, and I think that's very good for our kids to have seen that and to understand that that's within that family nucleus. But I think for me, that starting point is that I'm not sure where I am. I'm not sure what to do in these spaces. I'm not sure who I need to follow. I'm not sure who's got the right guidelines. I'm not sure what I should say, how I should use whatever profile or platform I have to talk about these kind of things. I'm not sure how I should call my friends out on stuff that I don't agree with. I think there's a lot in that, because I don't know how sure we can get, but I think we have to get brave. And then we have to be courageous and start doing it and start saying it and start calling it and start acting in that way. And if, in doing this, being a better bystander, I clearly have to talk about all the stuff that comes up in that and talk about it with men that I know, in social circles, in spaces that I meet them, and say, this is what's important, this is what matters. And kind of, do we become, do we have to have the conversation so that we learn while having the conversation too? I think that's maybe where we have to go with it.
And I'm with you, Mark. I think one of the things that I was kind of going in my head was, do men have to be sorted in order to do this? But I think, do women have to be sorted in order to do this? I think actually it's about being courageous, to adapt in the moment, to recognise what we don't know, but are prepared to sit with and evolve in that moment. So otherwise it's never going to change. Nothing ever changes. If we just sit there and wait that it's going to be perfect, or we're going to know everything, or we're going to be a particular way. And I think it needs a brave few who will start almost the wheel in motion, that it allows to go forward.
I think you hit the nail on the head there a little bit, Mark, in terms of we really have to shift the narrative from the male stereotype being the strong, has all the answers, takes control, leads, to the male role model being, it's okay to not know. It's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to need to work it out, to discuss, to have a partner to talk it through with, I'm totally with you. Like, I get things wrong. I don't know what I'm doing some of the time, but acknowledging that and saying,
but who does?
Exactly. Yeah. And yet the historical stereotype is that we should.
But do you think, Matt, because I often think about this, and with your expertise in burnout, I mean, do you think some of men's burnout is because of this stereotype expectation of what it should look like, where in actual fact it should be about partnership, it should be about finding a balance between two people in a relationship or within a circle of people, as opposed to going, this is what it looks like? I don't know. I mean, I guess this is the question.
No, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to go off and divert too much into burnout, but 100%. So many of the people that I talk to on that topic, so much of it is, I've gone down a particular road the society told me was the right road to go down. And I'm along this road and I'm no longer sure that actually this is the right road for me. And half the battle to avoid burnout is recognizing that before you get there. Unfortunately, too often it's a case of, I've burnt out. I now realize I was on the wrong road. I now need to find the right road. But yeah, 100%. It's about this almost societal norm of what is success? What does success look like? How do you pursue it? How do you build your career? And that's what it should be. Yeah.
Now, I've just knocked everything on the floor off my desk. Apologies for the noise. But no, I'm totally with you on that. And so I don't know. To that point, what do you think needs to change? Is it because we all need to redefine success better? Is it because we all need to listen better? I don't know. I love this phrase, and I have Lindley Gooden to thank for it. We all need to build better ears. And I think I love that phrase. But I can't take credit for it. But I think it's true. But I guess I'm going to throw it to you guys as to what you think, Mark.
I'm starting with a new client tomorrow morning, and one of the things she said to me when we were talking about getting into the coaching space, she said, in your experience, have you worked with enough women who are in senior leadership positions to understand the challenges we face that aren't faced by a man in that position? And that was a great question. I was like, okay, yes, I have actually, and I've learned. So it taught me an awful lot in that space. But for her to be conscious that if she was going to work with a coach, she wanted to make sure that the coach had seen or experienced that. It wasn't just going to have my own approach it from a male perspective, because it's a different challenge that we face. And I think maybe it's not just build better ears. Maybe we need to build better eyes, because we're not observant enough. We're not really seeing the picture from everyone else's perspective, because it can be hard to hear sometimes, because to hear it is to have to challenge ourselves in ways that we don't want to be challenged. But if we can't see it even, then it's very hard to also hear it. So I think we have to see, and we have to try and look from other people's perspective to know, okay, that's what's actually there. That's what's going on there. That's what we can see. And I think that's a good starting point. Can you see it from my perspective? Because when we can meet and see it from other people's perspective, then everything becomes much clearer, and then we can see where the real problems lie. Communication becomes so much easier and so much better, because then we stood in their shoes.
I totally agree. I think communicate. I mean, I remember dearly that my dad wrote before he died that communication is everything. without communication, we are nowhere. But I'm going to take what you're sharing, Mark, one stage further, because you said, she said, can you see it from my perspective? And I'm not even sure, for me personally, it's about can you? It's a case of, are you willing to try? Because I think so many times people say, I can see your perspective. And yet until that classic phrase of until you've stood in my shoes, tried to walk in my footsteps, then you really have no understanding. But never, no one could ever understand the journey I've been on, because no one has been on the journey I have not. But if somebody's prepared to step into that space and meet me where I am at, rather than try and make me to be where they want me to be, actually that just willingness to meet me in that space actually can really change the dialogue. And I think that is critical, because I think so many people are just too busy to get on to the next thing, that willingness disappears, and therefore we make assumptions because we're rushing. And I don't think that's just men. I think that's women do that as well. It almost comes full circle back to where we started this conversation around humanity, and is it less about men and women, men role models, women role models, but just seeing the human beneath all of this?
Yeah, I think the word that's coming out for me, the word that I'm going to take forward and try and use a little bit more in my modeling, is just curiosity.
That's such a brilliant word. It's like, and this came up today in this conference, and I said, because there was lots of conversations about, well, we need more money, and I said, but the moment we start saying we need more money, we stop being curious, because we stop finding ways of possibility for the same thing to happen when the obstacle is the way, i.e. there's no money. And curiosity for me allows us to inquire, allows us to understand, allows us to see what may not be immediately obvious, because we're asking ourselves, what else could be going on here? What is beyond and beneath the surface that we're too busy to understand or couldn't comprehend because we haven't had the experiences that individual's had? And I don't see that as a, something that men have, women have. I just see it as something that human beings have. I don't know. So I'm really conscious of time, and you have evenings to go to, but I know, hey, it's 40 minutes has disappeared before you knew it, didn't it? So I don't know, just to close, guys, and Chris has written lots and lots of stuff, and I haven't been able to bring her into the conversation enough, but I did, bring some of the stuff, and I will come back to her points in the comments afterwards. But I guess just to close, kind of what would you close on, Mark, in terms of your thoughts, sharing with the group, that those who are listening in?
I suppose, to this question, I was trying to see, so where was my role models growing up, and I think, so I always look to the male role models. Where are my male role models? But then where were my female role models of modeling what they could be too, that I could look up and admire? And did I have the ability to look at that and admire that and say, Jesus, well done you, that's really brilliant, and respect for you stepping into that space and doing that thing and stepping out of whatever role was originally assigned. And I think that's a part of it too. We actually need to champion the role models on both sides and look up to the role models on both sides, so that we acknowledge, and that's the curiosity piece too, that's a lovely put by Matt, but that we acknowledge and celebrate both sides. Because if we just look for our male role models, we're still just looking in the one direction. We're still not going to see the other side of things, and we need to see both and see, well, who can we champion there? And because once we find those champions or become those champions, then we're definitely on the right track.
No, I agree. I totally agree. You did just blip slightly with the internet connection there. I don't know whether that was me or whether that was you, but I think we got what you were saying around champions. Matt, final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think it's the curiosity. I like Mark's point about looking for role models on both sides, and that's another wonderful development I feel over the last 10, 15 years is in like the worlds of sport. Like me growing up, I had posters of Brian Robson, Roy Keane, I'm a Man U fan, maybe the odd England player, a bit more broadly. My son's got like Ella Toon on the wall, got Alyssa Russo on the wall, because actually they win things.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's great that we're seeing role models come through in what would be typically defined as masculine areas. The England women's rugby team as well, you know. I couldn't have named a single England women's rugby player when I was growing up, but my son can trot out half the team. And that's not because, it's a tokenistic gesture of we should be interested. It's that they're playing bloody great sport and they're winning things.
So the admiration is for what they're achieving as opposed to, you know, the sex that they are.
Yeah, 100%. If, you know, Ella Toon smashes one in from 30 yards, it doesn't matter what gender she is. That's a bloody great goal. And I'm going to try and recreate that on the playground, you know?
And that's a really interesting point, Matt, right? And a lot of this challenge we have is this comparison thing, you know? We're comparing, well, a man would do it this way, right? And I was listening to, I can't remember her name. She's brilliant. She is regularly on Irish radio talking about sport. I wish I could remember her name. And she made a really good point. The Irish women's hockey team got to the World Cup final, and like wouldn't have been, you know, pitched to be that high. They'd be kind of like a 10th, 12th in the world, and they've this world-class goalkeeper, and they got to the World Cup final, and everyone watched it and thought it was amazing. And it's like, oh my God, this was so good. And she said that one of the reasons why people did that is because they didn't have a comparison. They didn't watch hockey. The Irish men's hockey team weren't at that level, and so no one was watching them in this way. And we love a bandwagon here. So any success at all, we are on that bandwagon. And like, so everyone watched it and went, this is absolutely amazing. This is brilliant. This is great to see, because we didn't have to do the comparison piece. Where unfortunately a lot of football falls into that comparison piece, but it's a nice comparison that the women's team actually win something in England as opposed to the men's team never quite get there. But we do go and compare it, right? And like Gaelic football will be a massive sport in Ireland. And in the last 20 years, ladies Gaelic football, or women's, it should be, they call it ladies, which is, again, just goes to show you inappropriate. It should be women's Gaelic football, is also, because it's not gentlemen's football, you know, it's men's football, you know, so, but it's really gone through the roof. And the number of players is extraordinary. But it's a different game. And if you try and judge it like the other game, then you're comparing in the wrong thing. It's a different thing. And then you begin to learn it and appreciate it for its own. I think that's fantastic, that we can do that. And that comparison is the thing we have to avoid, and start taking things as they are and seeing them for who and what they are. And then we can learn more about them and then enjoy them in their own way.
I'm totally with you. And I think that's exactly the point, is it's recognizing, for me, we're valuable in and of ourselves. There isn't a need to compare. And I think that's true whether you're man, woman, boy, girl. We are enough just as we are, and the competition is against ourselves. And that's the role model we should most definitely be following. Anyway, I'm conscious of time. It's now, 7:20. I am sure you have things to be doing this evening. I thank you for your time, and thank you to those who tuned in. And we will see you next month for the next episode of Together as Allies, on Tuesday, the 25th of November, which is White Ribbon Day. To be told what White Ribbon Day is, because there are a number of people who don't know what that is, but we'll find the answer later on. Anyway, good night, everybody. Speak to you soon. Bye.
Yeah.
Good night. Thank you.